over lunchtime. Um, so yeah, at Face to Face, so Jane and I, you can see Jane there, we work for Face to Face HR. For those of you that might not know us, we are all about supporting small businesses in and around Oxford, but we also have clients kind of dotted all around the place with their HR needs. So we are all about kind of helping teams to perform at their best and managers to be able to support their teams in order to be able to do that. So at the moment, we're running a series of webinars, usually one a month, around a range of topics. We've looked at well-being, we've looked at the menopause, we're doing gut health today, and then our next one is all around sleep. So Jane and I are not the experts in all of these areas, so we are bringing in the experts to join us in these conversations. So today we have the lovely Roisin from Added Health. So Roisin, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about you and what it is that you do at Added Health?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's lovely to meet you all. As Robyn's kindly said, my name's Roisin and I am a registered nutritionist. I have a specialism in public health and I've worked in digital healthcare for about 4 years now. And prior to that, I sat in the food industry. So I've been in the health and food space for a little while. And I work for Added Health, which is a personalised health coaching service, which is led by doctors. So we're taking the client's whole health and lifestyle into consideration to help them build healthy behaviours little by little, which they can maintain in the long run, which we actually know that's the tricky bit. And as we're medically led, we stay really up to date with the latest research. And similar to Robyn, we're working with lots of different businesses and individuals. So at the moment, we're working with the University of Oxford alongside the NHS. And I can pop some more information in the chat at the end if anyone's interested to know more.
Yeah, Roisin and Added Health have supported Jane and I as well. We've got familiar with their platform, and it really is a great service for the team. So yeah, as we said, we're focusing on gut health today. So this is something I actually admit that I knew very, very little about until I was driving about a year ago, and I just was listening to a podcast, and then it ended, and then a new one came on, and I just carried on listening, and it was about gut health, and I was absolutely shocked because I'm somebody who I think prides myself on trying to do the best for my health. Not all the time, but I try where I can. And I was like, God, I really didn't know this stuff. So I think it's really interesting, going to be really interesting today to find out a bit more. I know that there has been quite a lot in the media recently about gut health and the things that we can be doing to support ourselves. But what we're interested in doing is kind of covering that, but then also looking at actually how you can, with some tips and tools that you can take with you to help improve your performance at work. So Roisin, do you want to kind of get started by touching on, I guess, first of all, why gut health is so important and how it can link to performance at work and how we're able to perform?
Yeah, that sounds like a really great starting point, Robyn, and then we can delve into some more practical tips and solutions, because I think actually it's great to have the knowledge and the understanding why, but we really need tangible bits to work from.
Yeah.
So to get started, when we refer to our gut microbiome, it's a collection of microorganisms, including things like bacteria, viruses and fungi, and they reside in our gastrointestinal tract. And I wanted to provide some context on size because actually it's really quite remarkable. There's 100 trillion microbes in our gut, and that weighs about 3 pounds, which is the same as your brain. And I just think when you think of your brain, you feel as though that's quite large, and you wouldn't think of the same as your gut microbes. So yeah, truly quite an incredible part of our body. And I'm sure you've probably all heard of gut health before, and it's really come to the forefront of conversations recently. And that's because quite a lot of research is being done in the area. And we now know that the gut microbiome plays a vital role in our health. So it supports with things like digestion, maintenance of a healthy immune system. And actually about 2/3 of our body's immune cells are in our gut. So whilst that's incredibly interesting as a standalone point, when we're putting our employee wellness hat on, that then influences things like you've touched on, Robyn, performance, sick days, energy levels. So it can really tie into our work life, as well as what you're doing outside of work. And then I also just really quickly wanted to touch on the brain-gut axis, because that's also been at the forefront of conversations because of the impact that this can have on our mental well-being. It's essentially a two-way communication system between the gut and our brain. And we now know there may be some significant links between mental well-being. So again, we just want to keep it at the forefront of our mind that actually our gut can have a huge impact on our life, both at work and outside of work. I also thought I would share what influences our gut health, because it's great to know why and what it is, but what influences are there? And there's loads. So there are lifestyle factors like what we eat, how well we sleep, how much exercise you do, how much alcohol you consume, what medications you're on. So something like taking a course of antibiotics can impact your gut microbes. And then right up to stress management. So actually that's loads of things, and I only touched on a few. And today myself and Robyn are going to talk through nutrition as our main focus, but we don't want to overlook the fact there are actually lots of other areas out there. And you may find by tweaking your nutrition, you actually naturally impact other areas of your health, because they are really quite intertwined. But nutrition is going to be our main focus today. Otherwise, we'll be here all afternoon.
God, I find that so fascinating about the immune system, because I know in the past, like when I have had a really busy job, or, been, maybe a bit stressed, and you maybe start eating a little bit less healthily, or not having the time for exercise, or just feeling stressed, you get more coughs and colds and you feel more rubbish, don't you? And it's like, and obviously linking that to work, then that means that employees are more likely to be off work with illnesses. So yeah, that's fascinating. And I've always thought it's like, coughs and colds you're getting from like germs from being too near people or touching things and stuff, and not washing your hands. But actually there's so much that you can do proactively to help yourself. And that gut brain access as well. Like, I'm sure we've all had, I just vividly remember like my first day at secondary school, like it was a new school, and driving there in the car on the way there, and just like that tummy feeling when you just like, oh, it's horrible feeling. And that's definitely, you can see the direct link there, can't you? It's just that we weren't necessarily all aware of it, and now we're kind of, as it's becoming more talked about, we are all becoming more aware of it. So yeah, as you said, there's a lot of things that can influence kind of our gut health, and we said that we're going to focus mainly today on nutrition. So as a nutritionist, can you tell us what we should be eating to look after our gut?
Yeah, great. So in short, the more diverse your gut microbiome is, the healthier it is. And diet is something that can have a huge influence. So some simple things that can help are eating a diverse plant-rich diet. So including things like cruciferous veg, that's things like cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower. Artichokes, asparagus, and garlic are also great for gut health, but any vegetables in general. And if you're looking for a target, try and aim for 30 different plant-based foods a week. That's giving your gut lots of different variety, and that really helps to feed it. Next up, there's fermented foods. So this is things like sauerkraut, kimchi, kefir, kombucha. They've also become quite popular, so you might be seeing those names a bit more now than you were maybe 5 years ago. And this is because it's great for increasing that gut diversity. If it's something you haven't tried yet, you might like to start gradually. And I say that as increasing fermented foods too quickly can cause some unwanted gut symptoms, so gas and bloating. So just a gradual introduction, starting maybe with a portion a week, and then slowly upping that. Ideally getting to about 1 portion a day is really good for gut health. Up to moving on to another thing is something you can swap into your diet. So we really want to be consuming whole grain carbs rather than their refined counterparts. So this is things like brown rice rather than white rice, whole wheat pasta rather than white pasta, wholemeal bread. You're getting the whole grain version. And that's because they're full of extra nutrients, but the extra fiber helps to feed the gut microbes. So after we've absorbed the energy and nutrients that we need, our gut microbes are feeding off that extra fiber. One more point is ultra processed foods. The term's being chucked around quite a bit recently. There's been different BBC documentaries, or it's in the news. It's really quite popular. And it includes things like crisps, chocolate, what you'd imagine as being quite processed, and generally they're quite high in added sugar. And these aren't great for your gut microbes. So they are something we want to be mindful of and limit your intake. And in saying that, it's not something you need to completely cut out, but just be mindful of how much you're having. So as a quick summary, eat lots of plants. The more diversity, the better. Some fermented foods are great. Choosing whole grains where you can, and then being mindful of how much of your diet is made up of ultra processed foods. But there was one more thing I wanted to just tie onto this. Again, it's really quite popular in the media at the moment, and it's whether to take a probiotic supplement, and is that a quick and easy option to promote good gut health? And there would be times we'd recommend a probiotic supplement. So perhaps you've been quite unwell and you've been on a couple of courses of antibiotics. It might be a good opportunity to take a probiotic, or it might even be recommended by your doctor. Another time it might be a good idea is if you're traveling and there's really limited access to food, of healthy food. So you're not getting much veg, plant-based options are really limited. You're eating lots of things with added sugar and they're really processed because ultimately that's all you can get. Then again, that might be quite a good point to potentially use it as a temporary measure. And I think the key word there is temporary, because if you're doing the above that we've been through with having lots of veg, actually it's not necessary. So we'd recommend, rather than spending your money on a supplement, trying to introduce those food first approaches we've just been through.
I think that's the 30, did you say 30 varieties of veg or fruit and veg?
So it's plant-based foods. So it can be fruit, veg, whole grains, nuts, pulses. And then surprisingly, herbs and spices also count. They're only half a point each, but a quarter of a point each, but they add up quite quickly.
Okay, so it's just maybe when you're going shopping, like having that in the back of your mind, like I don't know, if I always walk past like the cauliflower or something and never pick it up, but maybe it's just like every week trying to pick up a new veg or something.
Yeah, great way to do it. Like just
Yeah.
going for one different thing from usual, and then it can feel as though one thing isn't having an impact, but actually it is. So let's start with one, and then you can build upon that over several weeks. So don't worry about feeling as though you need to make lots of changes all at once.
Yeah, and I think when I was working with Added Health, one of the things that they did, I think it was just did for me, was she sent me a bit of like a meal plan for the breakfast, and it was like I needed to like have more high protein breakfast to like stop me wanting that 11 a.m. snack. And and as part of that, she was like, I've included like a diverse range of like fruit and stuff in the mornings, because I'm a bit of a sweet morning breakfast person. I did just have a quick question, and maybe this is something that other people have found and I know Miriam, you've got your hand up, so we'll come to you in a minute. But one thing I find really difficult is I go around the supermarket and I see kefir on the shelf and I pick it up, and then I this is one example. I bought this kefir and I think it was like strawberry flavored or something, and I was like, this just tastes like quite sweet, and I don't know, like, are there kefirs that we should be reaching for? What should we be looking for when we're looking for these kind of probiotic foods?
Yeah, really great point. And I love that you touched on how sweet it was. So it's likely because it's strawberry flavored.
Yeah.
So we'd like to think it's made from real strawberries, and there might be some in there, but it's likely to have some sugar or some sweetness added. So as a general rule to go by, I'd opt for plain where you can. And then if you like that sweetness, like you enjoy a sweet breakfast, stewing some strawberries at home and adding them on top would be a lower sugar alternative. And you're also getting then the benefits of having the strawberry as a whole, so the extra fiber and the vitamins, rather than the sugar and the sweetener because it's shop bought.
Yeah, okay. And then when should you take these? Because is there evidence to say that like you shouldn't take them after your coffee or something? Maybe I read that and it's not correct, but you don't want to undo the good work. If you think you're having the goodness and then you're having a coffee, you don't want to undo it. So yeah, when should you be taking it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think there's often lots of things about timings thrown out there, and there can be some research into them. It's often not very big, like it's not huge scale. So it's not very relatable for the whole population. So I would start by saying what feels manageable for me. Like if taking it first thing is actually the only point in the day you can fit that in, that's better than not having it. So I wouldn't get too caught up on the timings. But it is worth experimenting with having it later on in the day and seeing if that impacts how you feel at all. Maybe actually start to use that as an afternoon snack and you feel like that works quite well. Yeah, have a little play around and see what suits you. And yeah, I'd try not to get too caught up on timings if it's working for you.
Yeah, brilliant. Miriam, do you have a question? Oh,
Yes, please. Thank you. Hi. Thank you very much for this very exciting topic to discuss and talk about. And you were talking about different types of foods, and then you start mentioning points. And so, given my scientific background, I wonder whether you can share a list of sort of the points that each of the different foods have, just to have a knowledge of it, and also because there might be some, as you were saying, like some vegetables or some type of products that I haven't even tried just because they didn't exist in my life, and maybe I can try incorporating them. So that'll be very useful.
I've just made a note, and we can follow up afterwards with anything that needs some further resources or links to some papers, and we can provide that.
Thank you.
No problem.
Okay. And Roisin, you touched on when you are traveling and how having probiotics can be useful in those situations. Now, something that I find hard is when I'm, on the go, busy, or even if I'm just like working from home and you just have like 20 minutes between meetings to grab something for lunch, it can be really easy just to, my go-to is like just some crackers, white crackers and some cheese or something. And that's a good day. So are there any like simple swaps that we can be making? So if we're reaching for those like crackers, or if we're just reach for a bowl of cereal at lunchtime because it takes 2 minutes, like what swaps can you recommend?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And I'm sure we can all relate. Like, I know I'm also guilty of it. When life gets busy, things drop down your priority list. And that's really normal because you have to reprioritize things further up. So there are a couple of things that I stick by and recommend. The first one is, what could you add to your meal? So forget about completely changing it. What could you add to this meal to increase the nutrient value and promote gut health, which will then tie into your performance? So it's probably easiest if I maybe run through an example with this one. So let's take a bowl of porridge for breakfast. It's a really popular dish in the winter. We've made it with milk and oats. Just take a second to think, what could I add to this? So a couple of things that are easy additions are a spoon of nut butter, a sprinkle of mixed seeds, and of course you could use one variety of seeds, but actually if you can get mixed, you're just adding some extra variety in. And maybe potentially a small handful of berries, so you're also adding a bit of fruit. So before long, you've actually added maybe like 3 to 5 different plants to that meal, but you've kept the base meal the same. So the change doesn't feel too overwhelming, and ultimately it hasn't taken too long. Those additions, if they're to hand and you have them in your kitchen already, are probably an extra 2 minutes on your dish. So in a nutshell, look at what you could add to what you're already having rather than trying to do a huge overhaul when life is chucking lots your way.
Yeah, and I think it's like with my crackers and cheese example, it's then just opening like the veg drawer below it and being like, I'll just chop up some carrot or I'll chop up a bit of cucumber to go with it. And like that only takes like 30 seconds longer. But I really think from like what I'm hearing from you is it is literally about just stopping and thinking. So like when you're doing a supermarket shop, stop and think. When you're like going for your lunch or making your breakfast, stop and think. And it's like, that bit of veg at lunch might give me a bit more brain power for the afternoon. And also, okay, that's great. So
I do have a couple more tips for when life is busy, just because I think it's something lots of us can relate to. So another thing I would do would be take some shortcuts where you can. So it's great to say I'm going to cook from scratch every day, and that might be possible in days where everything's really smooth sailing. But when it's not, have some things that work well. So pouches of grains in the cupboard. They're not as cheap as making grains from scratch, but great to have as a backup. They're there when you need them. In the freezer, keeping things like pre-chopped veg. The Mediterranean version's great, and it often has like 5 to 6 different types in. So again, great for gut diversity. And all you have to do is pop it on the tray. It's pre-cut into the oven, and it's done. And then we just also want to have some protein sources easy to hand. So things like tinned chickpeas, tinned beans, tinned fish. Again, they're not as cheap as if you're using dried beans, but if you have them there, they're then really easy on the days you need them.
Yeah, I love those grain pouches. Like, I think they're amazing because you can just like have half a pack and you feel, and then just stick some like meat on the top or, veg sources of protein, and you've got your lunch. Like, it's great. Yeah, really.
And often if you're like, popping a tray of mixed veg in the oven, you can cook loads and then portion it into your lunch when you're having some grains and some meat and some fish or protein, whatever your chosen protein source is. And that's a really quick meal that's really nutritious, that hasn't taken you the world. So yeah.
I've never actually thought about those frozen roast veg. I often get the like peas and sweet corn and carrot, like little things, but I've never thought about getting, because there's no difference between that and just chopping it up yourself. It's just you're saving yourself a job. So
yeah. And if there are days actually you've got more time, you can chop it up yourself and pop it in like a reusable food bag and into the freezer, which is great if things are starting to go a little bit off in the fridge. You're saving it from food waste then as well.
Yeah. Okay, and then tying all of this back into the office then, because yes, quite a lot of us will be working from home, but some of us are now working, hybrid working patterns, or prefer to work from a workspace. So I think something that I've been thinking about is, what can companies be doing to support their team's health? And like, it's not to say, don't have cakes and biscuits and stuff in the office, but actually, like you said, Roisin, like, what can they be adding? And I was at a client the other day, and I went into their cupboard to get a glass out, and it was actually their snack cupboard, and they bought loads of like really good like cereal bars. So they went like, I think they had like the naked bars. They also had packets of like nuts and seeds, like mini packs. And I thought that was great. Like, and I've never really seen that before. Like, sometimes you see the fruit getting delivered every week, but I think maybe companies are getting worried about food waste and things if they're not sure how many people are coming in. So that can be quite difficult to manage. But I really did think that like getting that fruit and nuts and stuff like that in was a really good idea.
Yeah, I think that's great. And like you said, the office cakes and biscuits can be a challenge when they're there. And then, like you said, the hybrid working means there are different challenges at home, but there are a couple of things we can try out here that can help. So an example would be, you're in the office and there are those cakes and biscuits, and maybe everyone's having a cuppa and a slice of cake and a catch up. And if you're looking to reduce your intake of those types of things, it can be really challenging. So try to come back to why you want to make that change. What are you gaining from doing so? So that can really help to call upon your motivations. But then equally, it's important to address what you're losing. So what are you losing from making this change? And I think for the office cakes and biscuits one, often it can be social interaction. So everybody's meeting for that coffee, cake, catch up. So if you say, I'm not going, you've lost the social interaction, which is actually a driver for going to begin with. So it can be really helpful to kind of consider what you're losing, so we can pop some strategies in place. And I'm sure maybe you could feed in from a HR point of view, Robyn, but something that I think is quite helpful is speaking to some colleagues that you're close to about why you're making a change. So you can still go along, have that social interaction, but just not have the cake, and knowing that you've kind of spoken to someone, explained that you're not having any. And very often you'll find that other people are working on their health at the same time, and that community feel can be really beneficial. So being able to talk to people about what you're doing and what you're going through can really help.
Yeah, and I think like if there's an office manager in the company, or so the person who's responsible for sorting that stuff out, it could just be talking to them, and you don't even need to say, I'm trying to reduce my intake of this. It can just be, oh, I wondered if it would be worth us looking at like getting some other snacks in that, and because I completely agree. And I think, it's so important to have that social interaction. Like, that's amazing for our health as well. Like, we all know the effects from COVID where everyone was working inside and things, and how that made people feel. So you don't want everyone sat in the office and just sat at the desk, you want to encourage that. And like you said, often it is just that, oh, let's just go and get a biscuit and a cup of tea. But if next to the biscuit was a jar of nuts or something, you know, then that person can still join, but then make a different choice. So yeah, I think that's really, really interesting. And I also think from a, you know, we're touching on like, you know, speaking to somebody about what you're choosing to do. I think this is where the importance of managers really comes in. And actually, you shouldn't be waiting for somebody to come to you and say, oh, I'm trying to become a bit more healthier because I'm a bit conscious of this. You should be using the one-to-ones that you have with your team to check in. And Jane and I always say, if you're ever doing a one-to-one with somebody, part of that one-to-one should be checking in on your team's well-being, their physical, their mental health. You know, you might have some employees who just don't want to talk about it, and that's fine. But it is your job as a manager to ask those questions and make sure, you know, that you are being there and available for your team. Because if you don't ask, people might, you know, might think, oh, it's probably not appropriate for me to say what's going on, you know, with my health or whatever. And then they may end up having to take some time off sick and you didn't know about it. Whereas, you know, even, you know, if somebody, and we're not expecting you to be doctors, but it is just saying to, you know, asking the right questions. So saying to somebody, how are you feeling in yourself at the moment? Is there anything, you know, and if they say, oh, actually, I'm feeling sluggish or I'm struggling in the mornings, it's saying to them, well, you know, are you able to get enough sleep? Is there anything at work that's bothering you that's causing that? Or you know, do you have time to have a good lunch at lunchtime? You know, there might just be something going on that you can actually help with, or it might be a bigger thing, and you know, you might want to advise that they go and speak to their doctor or a specialist. And there are there are health check providers as well that people can go to, so you can get like comprehensive health checks around your team to, you know, to try and be taking more proactive steps to help support them with their health and obviously health as well. But you know, I think it's really just not shying away from those conversations and just, you know, listening to your team, because then, you know, that's, you know, they hopefully they will then feel comfortable coming to you in the future as well.
Yeah, I think there's some really good tips actually, Robyn, about how managers can support overall well-being, but actually nutrition as well, and how that feeds in, because it can be a challenge to know where to step in. But yeah, that's great. And then a couple of other things on that kind of management thought process is if you can start carving out time for lunch, that's really great. I know it can be really busy in workplaces and often we can eat lunch at our desks. But if we're focusing on individuals' nutrition and well-being, try and carve out for lunch a lunch period and lead by example so that you're doing so as well. And even if it's only a short one to start with, just getting the ball rolling can be a really good way to feel supported in the workplace with a nutrition spin on it.
One of our clients actually during COVID introduced a 2-hour meeting free time. So between 12 and 2, they don't have any meetings. And that's because a bit of like Zoom fatigue, I think people were just getting a bit like, oh, but actually that gave people there wasn't the excuse. Like they might have a bit of work that they needed to do, but that was 2 hours of their day that they've never had meetings, and they still do it now. And that's a great way of like encouraging, like, and some of the team will, like, now they're back in the office, will go to an exercise class together at lunchtime. They can do a 45-minute class and be back to the office, you know, in an hour and a half. And I think it's just like enabling your team to do that, because I don't think that as a manager you can just say to your employee, I want you to take your lunch break. Like that's, you know, that might work, but actually it's about facilitating that to be able to happen. And so as a company, thinking about the things that you can do to support your team. So is it, you know, making sure you go through their workload at the beginning of the week, structure how they can schedule their day, time blocking, that's something Jane and I have been doing. And like, honestly, the benefit that that's had on my day is massive. I feel like I have way more time to get stuff done. I'm way more focused. And I also carve out, you know, 20 minutes, half an hour at lunch to get outside. So it is just it's giving your team the permission to do that, that I think is really important. And as you said earlier, Roisin, like it's not just about the nutrition, it's about moving and doing the exercise as well.
Yeah, it definitely. Yeah, sorry, Jane. I've seen the question. I'll do that before we move on. Yeah, really great question, Mike. There's a lot of press around gut microbiome testing at the moment. It's an interesting area. If it's included as part of your health check, go for it. I would say they're really expensive to do privately for information that is still quite early days. So yeah, it's whether you want to spend your hard-earned money on a gut microbiome test when actually we know a lot of the changes, like including more diversity, fermented foods, all have a positive impact on your gut health. So I would lean towards trying some of that first rather than spending money. But if it's included as part of your health check, go for it.
Miriam's put in a question there. We normally have lunch and learn sessions where pizza is provided for the team. Do you have any recommendations on delivery food that might be healthier?
Oh yeah, this is a great recommendation, Jane. I've also had one of their grazing platters in Oxford. Yeah, they this can be a tricky one, but speaking to your management, there are generally healthier options available for delivery now. There's quite a lot of chains that have a healthy spin. But yeah, I can share some ideas afterwards, like a list of maybe more national recommendations, and then we can find ones close to your location and come up with some options.
I used to work for a company, and I loved what they did. When they were having a lunch and learn session, they sent round the menu for ITSU or somewhere like that, or Pret or wherever, and they let everyone before choose what they wanted. And then somebody would have the list of what they wanted and then just put a sticky note on as to whose name it was. And I thought that was great because, like, obviously everyone has like certain dietary requirements and stuff. So yeah. Oh, and Jane's put the green bike food as well. So there you go, Miriam. There's some options for you.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Roisin, at the beginning, you said that it is all well and good doing the stuff in the moment, but it can be harder to sustain these habits over the long term, which I'm sure we have all felt at times. So, tips for help to keep us on track.
Yeah, great point. And yeah, I think, like you've said, it's something we can all relate to. And personally, I know I've started habits and actually I haven't continued with them, but there's a reason why. So we'll go through an acronym that I really love called STEP, and it stands for size, time, enjoyment, prompt. So you might like to think about a habit or a change you've tried to implement whilst I discuss this, but I'll also chuck in some examples. So size. Does the habit or change you're doing feel like the right size? And this is really important to remember, it's for you. Is it the right size for you? Because that's what keeps you going, and everybody is different. And if there are days that what you're trying to do feels like too much, the chances are it's much harder to sustain because things that are too large feel quite overwhelming. Therefore, we don't do it one day, and that just has like a rolling effect. So there are a couple of different options you can go for here. You can reduce the size of your habit or change right down. So this could be having one portion of veg at dinner if you're not having any at the moment, rather than going straight to having half a plate of veg. That's a huge change. And you might do it for a couple of days, and then you think, oh, I've had a really rubbish day at work, things are busy, and you revert back. So try and keep the size of your habits small, or have a couple of different sizes available. So if there are days that things are going really well, go for the bigger habit. But if there are days you think, I just need to do something to keep the ball moving, go for your small habit. And then time. So are you implementing your change at a time of day that works best for you? Ultimately, we all have times of day that we work well at. And for me, it's the morning. I do all my hard tasks earlier on in the day because I know that's when I perform best. So utilize this time so that it works for your new habits. So if your goal is to have a balanced breakfast, but actually the mornings are really chaotic for you, starting to cook breakfast at that time probably, would feel quite overwhelming, and actually it's not fitting into your lifestyle. So what you could use here is you say, actually the evenings work much better. So I'm going to prep some options like overnight oats, pop them in the fridge, and then they're ready in the morning when I just need to eat something, rather than starting to cook at that time that doesn't work for you. Next is E, enjoyment, something I think that is massively overlooked when we think about making change, is that, are you enjoying it? So try and think of a habit that you've tried and not continued with. And I'd be really interested to know if you were enjoying it, because actually a lot of the time habits that we don't continue with are ones that we aren't enjoying. So what could we change so that you enjoy it more? And I think an example I hear quite often is, oh, I'd love to eat healthier lunches, but in my mind, healthy lunches means just a plain boring salad. I don't like them. They're not filling, they're cold, loads of different reasons. But when we look at making a change there, we think, oh, I've got to have them. So I have them for a few days. And actually, after a few days, you know, you've moved on because they're not working for you. So what could you change there to make it more enjoyable? You don't have to have a salad for lunch to have a healthy option. So let's try some other options, or jazz up that salad so that it's got great sources of protein and healthy fat in, and it's really quite filling. But ultimately, you want to enjoy what you're doing. And then the final one is P, prompt. And this is where if we forget about a new habit, so you've set one, but then you just forget to do it. And it's because you're not being prompted, it's not automatic. And that's really normal. But you want to add in some prompts to remind you about what you want to do. So for me, I always have a glass of water on my desk, because otherwise I can go ages without having a glass. But if it's there and I see it, I'm just taking sips throughout the day. And other things that can work quite well are like a sticky note on the fridge with healthy snack ideas or meals that are like ready to go in there. So you think, I'm feeling hungry. Oh yeah, I've already made that. That's the really easy choice because I'm being prompted to make it. Or using your calendar or your phone with apps, that kind of thing. Just having a prompt to kind of get you to move that habit into the more automatic phase.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And I really, really liked that. Like the first one. What was it again? The one about
Size.
size, that's it. Because I am notorious for being like, right, I am going to do this, and then you know in your head like that is probably a bit too ambitious, but you just try it anyway, and then you don't succeed. So I think for me, mine is going to be like, just when I do that weekly food shop, and like usually I'm just on autopilot and I am just going around and picking up the usual peppers for a spaghetti bolognese or carrots or whatever, just like stopping and thinking, what other vegetables can I pick up, and like maybe Googling a recipe that could go with that or something.
Yeah, and keeping it really small. So thinking, actually, besides when you have it, I'm just going to pick up one different type of veg, or maybe you always go for red peppers, picking up yellow. Like even the color diversity is great for gut health. So yeah, small changes, and then you can add improvements over time.
Yeah. Okay.
Can I ask a quick question, Roisin?
Yeah.
I read something, I just want to know if this is a bit of a myth actually, about the order that you eat your food in. Does that make a difference?
So it is really interesting. There's some research about eating vegetables first to help with blood sugar levels. Whether we should be really focusing on our blood sugar levels that intensely is an interesting area, because it actually comes down to what's on your plate at the end of the meal. So that has much more of an impact. So your overall balance versus the order. And for some meals, it's actually really impractical to say, I'm going to eat the veg first. And something that always springs to mind is like a curry or a stew, something that's all cooked in one pot. To say, I'm going to eat the veg first is, you end up picking it all out. And then you're maybe moving on to the meat, and then you're having the carbohydrates right at the end. It just doesn't flow. So if you're interested in learning more about your blood sugar levels, yes, there is some research to suggest that eating vegetables first can help. But I would come back to whether it works for you and your lifestyle and your meals. Actually, what goes onto your plate at the end or at the start of the meal, what you end up eating as a whole, has the most impact.
Yeah, one thing that Jess was saying to me when I was working with her from Added Health was like, because I have to be careful with my blood sugar levels, and she was saying it's just like, just try and think about having a protein with every portion of fruit or sugar that you have. So I stopped having muesli because, you know, that is very sugary. But she was saying, like, when I have an apple, just have some nut butter with it, or some oat cakes with it, or something that's like going to balance that out. So
yeah, exactly. So the overall balance can help with blood sugar levels, feelings of fullness. Lots of it's tied in. But yeah, keep the overall in mind rather than what you're eating first would be my advice.
Okay. Brilliant. And Mike has said that a food meal planner was a game changer for me. So is that, Mike, do you plan your meals every week then? How do you do this?
Yeah, so Friday night, I plan out what I'm going to be able to eat in terms of what my diary looks like. And then when I'm going to be at home, I plan out what my meal is, so I give myself some variety, and then I try and now drop in more healthier options and more seeds than I ever did, and more fruit and veg than I ever did. I tend to eat my veg first to get it out of the way, not to do the blood sugars. But then when I go shopping, I'm in that sort of like, I'm a little bit like you. If I go shopping, I always pick up my favourites. I'm not allowed to actually go shopping that often, so my price goes through the roof. But yeah, I know exactly what I'm going to be buying for them, what I'm going to cook, and then I try not to have things in the house that's going to tempt me away from that.
Yeah, that sounds really great, Mike.
That's good. The worst thing you can do is go to the supermarket hungry, isn't it? And then you come back with all
And
the
you're
snacks.
being lured in by the smell of the bakery, which is all very strategic moves because you're starving.
Yeah, don't go to a Lidl when they've got that like pastry section right at the beginning. That is not good. So we are drawing to a bit of a close, but we'll ask for some questions in a minute. But Roisin, I believe that you have 3 top tips you wanted to share with everyone before we leave. I mean, this webinar is being full of tips, but share your three top tips with us.
Yeah, I wanted to finish on some tips because I feel like we've actually, when me and Robyn spoke, we covered loads of different points, and I thought I don't want to overwhelm everyone with information, so I'll finish with 3 pieces that are kind of my go-tos. So the first, we've touched on it, is start small, and to emphasize the difference that this has. So an extra portion of veg every day for a year is 365 portions. Compare this to having 3 extra portions a day, but you can only do it for a week. That's only 21 portions. So that's an incredible change, even though it feels quite small. And with time, you can build it up. It's really gradual and sustainable, but start small, gain your confidence, find out what you like and what you don't, and then gradually add in other bits. The next would be to focus on controllable factors, and keeping work in mind. There are things that happen that are outside of our control. And something that often springs to my mind is dinners out that have a set menu. And you think, oh, that's a pain. Like, I have no choice over what I'm eating tonight. And you're right. If you're eating dinner and it's set and there's no choice per course, what you're being served is what you're being served. So I would take a step back and think, actually, what's within my control tonight? What's being served on my plate isn't. So could you have a look at portion size? Eat to your hunger levels. And if you're feeling full, leave some food on your plate. That's okay. Often these dinners out have multiple courses that we probably wouldn't have at home. So yeah, focus on hunger levels. Keeping hydrated throughout the meal can be quite an easy win. There's often water on the table, or it's being refilled in your glass. And just having some sips, it helps with digestion, which can then play into concentration and performance, which is great if you're on a work dinner out. But also it can help with just monitoring that portion size and how you're feeling. And then another one that might be within your control is how much alcohol you're having. So being mindful of how much you're drinking. And then again, just coming back to thinking, actually, the meal being served was outside of my control, but I've still done some things that were inside my control. So that would be number 2. And then number 3 would be expect some bumps in the road, because we've touched on life is busy and sometimes things happen. So following on from dinners out, work trips are often quite an area that can cause some challenges. And it can feel like they're actually a huge detour in our journey on this linear road. But if we're expecting there to be bumps and curves and twists and turns, it can make the process feel much easier. So if we were to zoom out on this and say you were away for a 3-day work trip, at the time that can feel really quite intense. I haven't been able to manage my usual breakfasts. I've had some work dinners out. I've had to have some other bits and pieces. I haven't been able to do my usual exercise routine. But if we put that in perspective of the whole month, actually 3 days out of 30 or 31 days is just 10%. So what you're doing the other 90% is actually what's having the most impact. So keep trying to zoom out and think there are going to be some bumps, but it's the overall balance that is having the most impact on my nutrition and my gut health and my overall health. So yeah, in summary, small steps, the ability to focus on controllable factors, and then expecting there to be some bumps in the road will help you to be able to progress towards your gut health goals, but also nutrition goals. And I'm sure actually some of the points we've discussed could be related to other areas like sleep and exercise as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think as well, like linking this back to performance at work, you know, if we can do all these things, like you said, those small steps, then over time, that's probably going to lead to, less coughs and colds, less feeling a bit rubbish. And even if, even if you're not having to take time off work for those days, it affects how you feel on a day-to-day, work. And like, it's horrible when they feel like you're just going to get a cold, when you feel like you're on the edge of a cold the whole time, you just feel run down. It's a horrible feeling, and you're never going to feel great at work. And it's also your brain power as well, how you're able to focus and sustain, like when we're all in meetings and things, if you've got to get through from like 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. in meetings, eating the right stuff to be able to kind of fuel that day. And also I think the link between your gut and your brain with stress as well, and like helping you to be able to manage the day-to-day of work and life and things as well. It's only going to help with that. So thank you, Roisin, that's been super helpful. Does anybody have any questions for us? It might be that you might have something that's a bit more personal, and if you do, feel free to message Roisin directly through this. But yeah, if anyone's got any questions, Mike, detox wise or not, do you want to elaborate?
Yeah, I think it comes back down to I'm really curious on gut microbiome and all that sort of stuff at the moment. And I've done a detox twice in my life and felt really good afterwards, but didn't really change a lot of habits.
Yeah.
6 months later down the line, if you like. And I think I did the detox to try and clear out and then reset. But so are they a wise thing to do? Are you stripping some goodness out as well as some badness, if you like? And I guess also it's, if you've coming back to Robyn's point, if your member of staff's not feeling great, how do you identify, is it X, is it gut health, is it Y, for example?
Yeah, great. I'll answer that in two parts just so that I really capture everything. And I think even in what you've said, you've kind of come to a good conclusion about detox, is that you didn't change the underlying behavior. So actually in the long term, what has the impact been of that detox? So depending what detox you did, or whether you just didn't, maybe you fasted for a while, if you were detoxing but you were including things like eating lots of salads and cruciferous veg to help grow that good bacteria, then you are growing it. But
we are now approaching Long Rugby.
Oh, Roisin, do you mind popping yourself on mute? Thank you.
So I would say that if you've tried it twice and you have found that actually your longer term behaviors haven't changed, it might not be the right approach for you. Some people find a kickstart can be quite helpful. If you've tried it and actually it's not worked for you twice, I would suggest we would look at underlying behaviors and changes and things that actually where you want to be in 6 months, but how we could implement changes to get there long term. And then for the second point about more employee-based care, awareness and understanding like what's where it stemmed from, I'm sure you can also tie into this, Robyn. And I think it's hard. It's tricky if you don't know the full picture, and we only see a snapshot of someone's life. So it can be hard to identify, is it their gut health, or is there something happening at home? Are they really stressed and that's impacting their gut health, or is it their nutrition? So yeah, did you want to tie in from a HR point of view on this, Robyn?
Yeah, I think it's like I said before, as a manager, you're not a doctor. So, you don't need to like diagnose, but I think it's about asking the right questions. So, if they're saying to you, I'm just really struggling at the moment. And then it's saying, well, what are you struggling with? How's that making you feel? And then you can say, are you getting enough sleep? Do you feel like, you can be asking those kind of diagnostic questions, I guess. But I think, and it might be that, quite quickly you can come to the root cause of something and say, right, I feel that, I feel like it could be related to this. But I think what is difficult is that GPs have, 10 minutes with somebody, right? Like, and often they, it's through no fault of their own, but they're not. I've got friends who are GPs, and they've said this, that they're not trained in the lifestyle factors. Like, they're trained in what medicine to give somebody for, what infection they have, rather than actually to ask the right questions. So sometimes it can be dependent on who the person is able to see, which is why services like Added Health are really good, because they get into the nitty-gritty of actually what's going on with somebody and their kind of wider health. But I think it's, as a manager, it's not about diagnosing, it's just about asking the right questions, and through that you might be able to diagnose and you might be able to make some suggestions. And also it's being careful as a manager to not become the counsellor and not become the, you know, the person that somebody goes to with every single problem. Like, you're there to enable them to do the best they can at work, but that might mean encouraging them to get some more support, whether that's through a GP, occupational health. There's so many, you know, places out there, and Jane and I are always available if anybody has got an employee who's struggling with things and they don't know where to turn. You know, we can always support, and we can also support in how to actually have those conversations. Often we put together kind of conversation starters for one-to-one meetings. So just some kind of prompts of questions that you can be asking, because sometimes it's quite hard to know what to say. Any other questions from anybody?
I've just popped into the chat because you tied in the bit of the medical aspect there, that actually if anyone did want to try out Added Health and get the medical input alongside some coaching, they do offer a trial for 12 weeks for free for up to 10 employees at your business. So you're welcome to click on the link to find out a bit more.
That's great, thank you, Roisin. Yeah, I would recommend them. Okay, well, yeah, as I said, you may have personal questions, so do feel free to drop those to Roisin, and Miriam, she'll come back to you. You'll come back, won't you, on those other couple of things that you asked for as well. So yeah, so just as a reminder, like Jane and I, we're here. You know, if you have any questions about how to help your employees with their well-being, with their health, you know, we're always around, and Added Health can definitely support you on that journey as well. But hopefully you've all got some good takeaway tips, and we can all start building some sustainable habits. And in a year's time, we'll come back and our guts will be in great health.
Amazing. Well, it was lovely to speak with you today, Robyn, and have much more of a conversational style chat rather than deliver a presentation. It's been lovely to see everyone's faces as well.
Yeah, hopefully you all found it enjoyable and interesting. So yeah, thanks everyone for taking your lunch break, and now go and get some salad with grains and a bit of protein and smash the afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
bye.